This tiny practice focuses on lower body strength and mobility. All you'll need is a blanket, 2 blocks, and about 15 minutes of your time. Set yourself up for constructive rest with the blanket under your head and with your blocks under your toes and your heels on the floor. Your feet can be about hip width apart. Allow yourself to settle. Allow your whole body to soften and expand. Allow your neck to soften so that your head can rest back against the blanket, and allow your head to release away from the top of your spine. Allow your whole back to spread across the floor. And as it softens and spreads, allow your abdomen and your chest to soften and expand. Let your shoulders release out away from each other. Bring your awareness into your hips. There might be a little something going on in your hips, but can you soften around the tops of your thighs and do a little less in there? And allow your lower back to spread across the floor. Roll over onto your side and press yourself up so that you can take the 2 blocks and place one of them between your feet and the other between your knees, and then lie back down again. Have the 2 blocks the same width, either the narrow width or the middle width. Lie back with your head on the blanket. Once you're in position, press your feet into the block, press your knees into the block, and keep a certain amount of that pressure going throughout the whole exercise. As you press your feet in, press the block back towards you and reach the knee block away from you to activate the backs of your legs. You might also roll your sitting bones towards your knees and your abdomen towards your head, and then lower yourself down. Keep the block between the knees, but walk your feet as far out as you can, perhaps to the edges of the mat. And let's go through the same process. Press your feet into the floor, press them back towards you, and reach the knee block away from you as you lift up, and roll your sitting bones towards your knees. The first variation worked the whole of the back of the leg. This works the inner leg more. And then lower yourself down. Put the block between your knees to one side and adjust the foot block so that you can have it near enough to you, so that you can rest the outer edges of your feet on it with the soles of your feet together and your knees apart. Press your feet into the block, press the block back towards you, and again lift your hips, reaching your inner thighs and knees away from you. Roll your sitting bones away from your head. And then lower yourself down. Roll on over to your side and come on up. We're going to do an Uttanasana, an intense stretch pose sequence. Take your blanket and fold it up so that you have a little ridge of padding that you can use in the next 2 variations. You'll also probably need your blocks as well. Set yourself up with your feet about hip width apart and your heels on the blanket and your toes on the floor. So you're doing this with heels elevated. And because you've got your heels up, that's why you might need your blocks, because the floor will be a little further away from you. Have something to put your hands on. And lift your hips up towards the ceiling as you reach your feet down into the ground. Reach your heels into the padding, send your toes out across the floor. You might need to turn your blocks up a little higher as you now press your toes down and lift your heels up for an even greater calf stretch. drop your heels back to the padding, pause there for a second, just allowing everything to soften and settle, and then come on up and change your position. Now you're going to have your toes up on the padding, toes up and heels on the ground. And again, you might need to have the blocks in front of you to put your hands on. Let's start with those knees bent. Fold the knees forward, reaching them out over the middle of your foot as you lengthen your calves down into your heels and your heels into the ground. And then change direction. Lift your hips. As you send your hips up towards the ceiling, send your heels down and see if you can take just a little bit of weight into your upper body. Soften wherever you feel the stretch. Step back off the padding so now you have your feet flat on the floor. Take your 2 blocks, turn them up to their highest level and come into half Uttanasana with your fingertips on the blocks. Reach your feet into the floor, lift your hips up towards the ceiling and expand your whole back up as you send your head out. Keep the legs straight, keep your hips lifting as you fold over. And once again, wherever you feel the sensation of stretch, allow it to soften and to spread across the back of your body. Return your fingertips to the blocks for half Uttanasana, stretching the legs a bit more, reaching through your torso a bit more. Put your hands on your hips and come on up to stand in Tadasana. And then take those arms and reach them up towards the ceiling. Stretch them up, lifting up through your armpits, lifting up through the sides of your torso so you get a little longer than perhaps you were before. And then keep that length in your torso as you release your arms down and stand here softly, neck free, head releasing up off the top of your spine. Clear your sticky mat and set yourself up for Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. Plant your palms, lift your chest, lift your hips up and back and reach back through your legs. Spread your toes, press them down and stretch them forward as you reach your heels back into the space behind you and open up the backs of your legs. Bend your knees and rest in child's pose. Big toes together, knees wide enough apart that your torso can release through, and put something under your head if it's going to make the pose a little more accessible for you. Take a moment to soften into all your joints. We're going to take Utkatasana, fierce pose. In preparation, take your 2 blocks, turn them up to their highest level, and come into a half squat. So have your feet hip-width apart, fold at your hips, your knees, and your ankles, and bring your fingertips lightly to the block. Now pause here for a second, getting into those joints. Reach your heels back and down, send your knees forward as you lift your torso up, and send your head out. And then keep all of that going as you stretch those arms up alongside your head. Can this pose be as dynamic as your downward facing dog was? Hips going back, torso and arms reaching out. And then fold over into Uttanasana once again, intense stretch pose. Reach your feet into the floor, lift your hips up towards the ceiling, and take the time in this pose to soften your legs. Return to half Uttanasana, put your hands on your hips and come on up, and then give yourself a moment in mountain pose. We're going to take a tiny little flow here to do some standing poses. We're going to start in Prasarita Padottanasana. Have your blocks on either side of your sticky mat ready for you. Come and stand with your feet wide apart, outer edges of your feet parallel. Fold forward from the hips and reach your arms out in front of you. So your upper body is a little bit like downward facing dog as you stretch out, but you're very much in your legs. Reach your feet into the floor as you lift your hips up towards the ceiling. Turn to the right. Turn your left foot in and your right foot out for extended side angle pose. Bring your right hand to the block and stretch out through that whole left side of your body. Soften into your right hip as you send your right knee away from you. Turn towards the floor, cycle through the middle and around to the other side. Again, bring your hand to the block and turn sideways as you stretch out through the right side and soften into your left hip. Leading with your head, cycle through the middle to come around to the first side again in that nice wide extended side angle stance, but this time lift up to Warrior 2, Virabhadrasana 2. Once again, soften your right hip and send your knee forward as you reach through your left arm. Sweep your head down and around to come to the second side. Send the left knee out as you reach through your right leg and sweep up into the pose. Left thigh goes one way, right arm goes the other. Turn towards the floor, come around through the middle. Turn to the right for triangle pose. Once again, you can have a block under your hand or you could put your hand on your leg as you reach through both feet, stretching both legs. Let your hips turn slightly towards the floor as you turn your chest up towards the ceiling and broaden across your shoulders. Turn to the floor, cycle back through the middle, all the way around to the second side for triangle pose again. Big reach through the feet, stretching out through those legs. Turn your chest towards the ceiling, broaden across your shoulders. Come on up out of your pose and step your feet together. Bring your feet hip width apart and then fold over in Uttanasana. Lift up out of your pose. Give yourself a brief moment in Tadasana, in mountain pose, softening and expanding. And then set yourself up for final relaxation, for Shavasana. You can put the blanket under your head so that the back of your neck can lengthen. And then use your blocks to support your knees so that your lower back can spread across the floor.